Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to Hush Harbor. We're trying our new format. This is more of a talk. We'll be going through the Bible, but not so much in the standard format of the sermonic exposition where I go through pick a scripture and then talk about the scripture, breaking down what I exegeted or how I exegeted the text and telling you that, but talking more on a casual, more relevant and timely manner. And today I want to talk to you about something called spiritual drought. Spiritual drought. Specifically, if we look in the book of Genesis, chapter 41, we read about the Joseph, and he was actually brought out of his prison cell and brought before the Pharaoh because there were other men that said, "Yes, this young man that's in the dungeon interpreted my dreams," and so Pharaoh wanted to have him interpret his dream. Pharaoh had two dreams. In the first dream, the Pharaoh dreamed that there were seven fat cows that came out of the Nile and they grazed in the grass. While they were grazing, there were seven thin cows that came out of the Nile, and the seven thin cows ended up eating the seven fat cows. Now, in Pharaoh's second dream, there were seven plump ears of corn growing on a stalk, and then there were seven thin ears of corn that grew afterwards on that same stalk, and they swallowed up the plump ears of corn. When asked by Pharaoh, Joseph told him that his dreams were about 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine or drought. Now, the skinny cows and the skinny ears eating their predecessors was just symbolic of the people not remembering the years of plenty because the famine would consume the land and just be on the people's mind all the time. And because we're talking about an agrarian society, we can assume that the famine was caused by a lack of rain, a lack of water, or a drought. What's a drought? A drought is a time when you have less rain and higher temperatures, and this leads to drier than normal conditions. And as a result of that lack of rain, there are fewer crops to harvest, and there is a famine in the land. Now, technological advances of today in developed countries has led to development of drought-resistant crops, but those crops are still subject to a lack of rain, and they'll give a lower yield or a smaller harvest because of a lack of rain. So it's not a full-scale prevention of drought affecting our crops today, but it's not as much as it would have been back in those times when there weren't as many technological advances we have. But in life, we experience different types of droughts. We might have situations in which the amount of money we earn or have saved is just not enough money to make ends meet. You know, the saying, you run out of money before the month. There are those who among us who experience food insecurity, and I think food insecurity is better seen as a euphemism for famine, because these people are sometimes having to make choices, life altering choices about how to spend their money. You know, what about money for gas to be able to get to and from a job that isn't even paying them a livable wage to start with? Or even worse, are they going to have to pay for some life-saving medication this month for a family member, resulting in shrinking their grocery budget? Another drought we might experience, though, is the one I want to talk about today. It's a spiritual drought. And this is when we don't feel as if our praying and our Bible reading is just worth the trouble. Is it really worth my time and effort to read the Bible on a consistent basis? What if things are going great? Can I just take a break from praying all the time? What if things are just seem to be getting worse? Loved ones are dying. You know, we have a death every week, or we're having real significant money issues, or we're in the midst of marital or family problems. Is God even paying attention? is sometimes what we ask. So is it worth it, what we go through? But we all go through it. Yes, even ministers. The only difference is that the spiritual drought for your spiritual leader or pastor is a one that affects us all as well. So if your pastor or your minister or spiritual leader or faith leader is going through a spiritual drought, it will impact you. And there are so many things that people in leadership positions don't feel that they can talk to other members about for fear of causing what would seemingly be a spiritual crisis. So what do you do if you're in a spiritual drought or famine? Sometimes the best thing to do is to step away. Step away from the situation that might be causing you the drought. And I know that may be easier said than done. But if we can just step away, even if only for a moment, it might help us change the way we see things. Maybe we can find another way to reconnect with God. Maybe we're just doing the same thing over and over and over again, and it becomes repetitive and just so mundane, and you're just looking for a new way to feel connected with God. Maybe it's time for a vacation, even if it's only for a day or most of a day. Many of us don't have the luxury of taking a whole vacation for a week to some exotic place. But we also don't have the luxury that Pharaoh had of someone telling us in advance that we'll experience a spiritual drought. Spiritual drought can be brought on by, like I said previously, a death in the family, somebody very close to you losing a loved one, an illness diagnosis, some terminal illness, or mental and emotional struggles. In some instances, we may have to seek therapy or counseling to help us deal with our non-spiritual issues. Another thing that we might need to do is to find someone that we can be real with. Someone who will allow us to be fully transparent, to be ourselves. There's always a need for non-judgmental companions or friends and family members. It's hard to find that person though when you're in the midst of the drought, but that might actually be the best time to see if that's going to be the person you can trust with your deepest, darkest secrets, no matter what they are. We might also try to journal. Get your journal or notebook and write things down. It can be freeing to move some of the things out of your minds and onto a piece of paper. And that way, we don't have to feel that we have to keep remembering or recalling something. It may allow us to be able to shift our perspective. And just as Pharaoh tasked Joseph with, this week I task you with something. Take some time, sit down, figure out what preparations you can make for your next spiritual drought. You all take care, be blessed, Rev out.